Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I want you to pause the video at the beginning here so that you can grab a notepad and a pen, because I want you to jot down an action item sometime throughout this video. Commit to yourself that you will pause the video again. You'll jot down something that you are going to implement in your business today to drive your business forward, because that's what it's all about. Implementation in the name of improving your business. Today, I want to talk to you about a concept of recognizing your people, celebrating their success, acknowledging their accomplishments. Now, this is something that has never come easy to me, and I'm not sure why. I mean, we all have our various personalities. I am one who is not quick to praise for whatever reason, and that is a liability in management. And as a result of that liability, I needed to really learn about this and strive to make this something that wasn't going to impede my management skills and effectiveness. So what I had to do was put some mechanisms in place to mitigate the fact that it's a weakness of mine. So you have to ask yourself to begin with, what are you doing currently to celebrate your people's success? And again, that's about, recognition. Recognition is so important. And of course, one way that we recognize people is through their pay, especially if they have a pay for performance, some kind of commission or bonus pay plan. Then yes, there is recognition inherent in the pay, but I'm going to tell you that's not what we're talking about today. And if you think that that covers it, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. I actually had the opportunity to participate in quite a bit of training with the Disney Institute, both operational management training as well as customer service training. And I recall one of the things that the Disney Institute instructor at this particular course shared with us was their research within their parks and within their organization about what it is that people report that they most want. Now, you might think that, money. People get a job so that they can earn money. Of course, that's true, but that is not what the number one response was. The number one thing that people want is recognition from their immediate supervisor, their employer, basically a pat on the back, acknowledgement of their efforts and accomplishments. Number two, interestingly enough, was food, some kind of perk involving food. So keep that in mind as well. That may be one of the ways that you can recognize people and give them that acknowledgement and pat on the back, is rewarding them with food. So we're not going to really get into a lot about remuneration and pay plans. Instead, I want you to think about the various other ways that you can celebrate success in your organization. It all starts with, I guess, number one, understanding that people really desire this. We have this innate desire to be recognized for our efforts. And of course, it changes from one person to another, depending on the personalities, backgrounds, upbringing, and so forth, and their paradigms. People have this to varying degrees, their need for recognition. And you may have had employees or relationships with people where you've considered somebody particularly needy. They're always promoting themselves and talking about, what they did and everything. That had sort of an adverse and opposite effect on me as what the person might desire. And when I encounter people like that, I don't know what it is about me, but because I am so stingy with dishing out praise, that when a person is really sort of begging for it and self-promotional, I would even, clam up even more and wouldn't give it to them. It's just, right now I'm confessing to you the things that you shouldn't do, that are, weaknesses and liabilities in my management effectiveness. But it's important to look at that, because you have to ask yourself that. These people who maybe act that way and really are self-promotional, they are just sort of an alert to you and a reminder to you. They're the vocal ones, but everybody feels that way. Everybody wants that, even those that are very, very quiet about it. Now, the ways in which you recognize people can change based on their personalities. Some people may want it, very public, and they like to be sort of not put on a pedestal, but put out in front and be recognized by all their peers, and people can clap for them or give them congratulations. Others are much more meek, and they have a personality where they might appreciate a pat on the back in private, something that they could share with their loved ones and people closer to them. They may be more embarrassed if they had to step forward to take their recognition. So you do have to modify your methods based on the people. Now, I want to point out that, okay, let's just summarize here what we've got so far. Number one, you have to accept that people all have this to varying degrees, but everybody wants recognition. Once you accept that, you have to ask yourself, is that something that you're naturally good at? Do you naturally praise people, and are you always looking for ways to celebrate success in your organization? If you are anything like me, and the answer to that previous question was no, not so much, then what you need to do is formalize a process to make sure that you're doing this. You have to organize yourself to make sure that this does not become a liability of your management effectiveness. Next, think about your organization, and there's a variety of different industries and businesses of the audience for this video. So I don't know whether or not you have a sales team but what I want you to think about is who are the people in your organization, and sort of lay it out in your organizational hierarchy chart and ask yourself, who do I need to recognize the most? And I would submit to you that is your productive employees. Now that sounds like a very general term, and you're thinking, well, of course, Michael, we want to celebrate the success of those who are productive, those who are high performers. That's not exactly what I mean. Instead, what I'm saying is the people who are most responsible for generating your revenues. Maybe that's a rough definition of what I intend to communicate when I say your most productive employees. So oftentimes that's your salespeople. They sell your product and they generate the revenues. It could be your marketing team. If you have a more passive sales force or a passive sales process and channel that relies more on e-commerce, then it could be the people who design those things for you, who are A/B testing, heat mapping, and your marketing team that's looking for ways to improve your sales through improving and refining your website and your social media. It could be them. Maybe you are a contractor, and of course, so the people who move your inventory, and in the case of contractors, your inventory is your specialized knowledge and your distribution of that, typically in terms of hours. So, in the case of example I've used before, as a plumber or an electrician, the hours that are sold, you are a productive employee, but maybe you have a team of contractors. You have a whole team of plumbers that are going out in a day, and you're selling their time, or electricians or framers or cabinet makers or whatever, but those specialized knowledge hours, those are your productive employees. And some of those are great examples that contrast a typical sales team. A typical sales team would have a very gregarious personality, very outgoing, or you might be more introverted as a contractor. Not necessarily so, but those are maybe generalizations that you may observe. And so therefore, in those two examples, you may want to create a way of celebrating success for your sales team that involves more public recognition, and those individuals who maybe are more introverted, in the example of, say, a contractor who is an outstanding performer, then you might want to celebrate his success more privately and just respect whatever seems to work most for them. Then, of course, once you've divided this out, and then you've got your administrative and frontline personnel who are responsible for maybe reception, customer service, accounting, all these kinds of things. And those people, very important to the logistics of your operation. Every team member you have is critical, and everybody has this underlying base need for recognition. So you want to put things in place for them too. But again, those people who may be in your accounts payable and payroll departments and more administrative nature, who aren't face-to-face with customers and that kind of thing, those people may be a little bit more introverted, and the way that you recognize them, it may be in front of their peers, people that they really know. You don't want to sort of force them out in front of everybody kind of thing. And you can also do a public recognition of somebody through a digital mechanism, through an email, through a newsletter, through some kind of communique to the team, to the customers, where you recognize someone and maybe you involve their picture or whatever. So we've talked about, understanding that everybody has this need, understanding yourself and whether or not this is natural for you. And then we talked about making sure that you break up your organization and understand the differences. Make sure that you are acknowledging those people who drive revenues. Let's just be frank about it. Without their performance, your organization is unsustainable. It's not going to be viable. You need people who drive revenues and are productive. So even though everyone in your organization is more critical, I suspect you would agree with me that some positions are a little bit more expendable, and maybe they're more transient in nature anyway, where you turn those positions over. But those people who are driving revenues, those are your critical people that you really want to go out of your way to celebrate their success. Okay, now start to think of how can you do this. I think that's your homework assignment today, is brainstorm. I don't want to take up your time by just giving you every example I can possibly think of. I actually considered that. I thought about doing that in advance and throwing up on the screen a whole bunch of ideas. If you want me to do that, if you're looking for ideas and you're at a loss for ideas in your organization, then either reach out to us or put a comment in this video, and then I'll respond to that and give you some more ideas. But I want you to more generally think of how you can recognize people. And we talked about earlier the example, literally you can have a literal pat on the back, where you literally go up to somebody and pat them on the back and say, hey, good job, or whatever, the proverbial little shot in the arm kind of thing. And food was the other thing. You might take someone out for lunch, you might buy them a lunch, or you might say, well, here's a gift card, take out your a spouse or a loved one, or somebody else on the team. Food is a big one according to the Disney Institute. So start to brainstorm and think how you can do this. But it doesn't always require money. That's a real key that I want to get across to you here. People want recognition, and sometimes a friendly word from the boss, from somebody in authority, is really empowering to people. Or maybe empowering is not the right word, and I'm reluctant to use the word motivating, but it is very gratifying, and it makes people feel good. And you want to do that. You want to try to create an environment where people want to come to work and they enjoy coming to work, and they realize that when they put in effort, it doesn't go unnoticed and acknowledged. Think to yourself, be empathic. Think, can you recall a time in your career, maybe when you weren't in management, you weren't running your own business, and your boss never acknowledged anything you did, and that it was really deflating to you? And what would you have wanted that person to do? What would have gone a long way with you? And could you implement those things? So earlier when I talked about the idea that this stuff doesn't come naturally to me, and I said, so you've got to put mechanisms in place to sort of automate this and make this where it just happens automatically, then I want you to think about that as well, and how can you do this? The first thing I want you to think about is the frequency. I would like you to try to get in the habit of recognizing people, celebrating their success, acknowledging accomplishments, or what they say is catching people doing the right thing. Catch somebody doing the right thing. I want you to do that every single day. And then I want you to also do it more formally, weekly, monthly, and annually. So when it comes to, let's start at the other end. Let's start annually. Annually, it's, I think, pretty important to try to put some kind of awards ceremony together. And think of the various categories. I like to think of all the different ways, brainstorm all the different things that are really important. So it could be top performer in terms of customer satisfaction. It could be top performance in terms of sales generated and what kind of sales. You could break sales out by product. You can break sales out by departments, all these types of things. what are the various performance metrics that you already record and you have in your report cards? Those are a great place to start. And if you don't have those, then reach out to us so that we can put a report card together for you and your team and your departments, and then start recording these things. And that's the other thing you're going to learn is in order to do a more annual award ceremony, you're going to have to measure stuff. But this will inspire you to measure things that you haven't thought about measuring before. Think about anything that sort of makes you happy as the boss, as a manager, as somebody who's got his finger on the pulse of the business. What are things that are very encouraging to you? Just brainstorm those things and then recognize that. And so have an award ceremony, and at that award ceremony, you should distribute some kind of plaques, certificates, trophies. You don't have to spend a fortune. And these days you can make stuff up on your own computer if your budget is very limited. And there's a lot of different companies you can reach out to get inexpensive awards, medals, whatever it is, something for the person to have tangible besides just mentioning their name. And if you can do this in person, where you can have people come up and accept the award from their supervisor, from the boss, from that person who they're most likely to want that pat on the back, then organize that. And I would suggest that you might want to organize this around some event where you had some food, maybe a banquet. We've done breakfasts in the past. We've done dinners, parties, like just, all out parties. Like think about, just putting together, with a DJ and all that kind of stuff. You can do these things. Maybe you already have a company picnic or something that you're doing where you can incorporate some of this stuff. Be careful, because you don't want to dominate another event. Like I wouldn't recommend this necessarily at a Christmas party where it's already taken up with sort of a specific agenda that you have at your Christmas party. But you get the idea. When people get together, that's an excellent opportunity to recognize people. Again, be careful though on making sure, if you're going to recognize people publicly where they're meant to get up in front of everyone, I don't think you're going to it's not going to be embraced as much by the introverts in your organization. So that would be, if it's a party or if it's a get together for everyone, then I would say then you may just want to acknowledge those more extroverted people, those more gregarious personalities who don't mind coming forward. So again, you got to think of these kinds of things. So annual. A monthly, you can have a lot of the same awards, but now you're not doing, say, a certificate or whatever, but you are still acknowledging monthly. So let's say you had your top salesperson for the year award. Well, you have a salesperson of the month that you recognize every month. And you could do quarterly as well. More often is better, in my opinion. So, but at least monthly. And now in the monthly one, what you could do is make sure that you include a picture. If this is, again, something that people are getting together, it could be a sales meeting, it could be a meeting of whatever department is recognizing. You can do this individually for sure. So maybe the annual one you do as a whole company. If you have a bigger company, you can break it out by department for your monthly ones. And then weekly, again, same thing, those very same things, maybe fewer categories, but the most important ones you want to acknowledge on a weekly basis. So if you're really on a mission to get your 5-star Google reviews up there, then recognize those people who are responsible for acquiring some 5-star Google reviews each week. And you're putting that stuff up there. So anything that you can record and acknowledge on a regular basis, do so. Now, when we get down to the daily one, I don't want it to be formal anymore. I'm not looking for you to acknowledge your salesperson of the day. Now, it's okay if you had a particular person who had an outstanding day, then you should do that. You should go up and high-five them. But what I would look for is opportunities to celebrate the success of people who don't get it very often. So, you might have a star performer on your team who you're recognizing weekly, monthly, annually. They're used to it. But you have somebody who has a great day for whatever reason. They just shone that day. They had outstanding performance in some way. Go out of your way to recognize those people who don't get that opportunity to be recognized. That's your daily task. find ways to catch people doing the right thing. And it can be anything. It could be, I used to be a safety inspector. That's a whole nother anecdote that I won't spend time with. But I was quite young, and I was in a more than $100 million operation. I was the safety inspector, and I went out of my way to recognize people who I witnessed doing things safe. And I gave them little prizes, little baseball caps with company name on it and that kind of stuff. You know, some safety gear like safety glasses, things that they might otherwise have to pay for on their own. I made sure I had an inventory of that and distributed that kind of thing. You don't always have to spend money. You don't always have to give a prize. Another thing I have done for years is kept chocolate bars, just candy bars present, and I would go around, and sometimes I would go on a mission. I'd go and find someone that I thought was doing a good job, and I would distribute that to them. Or I might do it at random and just sort of say to somebody, it would be an opportunity to speak to them, acknowledge them, talk to them, find out how they're doing, and then offer a friendly word. It's better, I suppose, if it could be something that you were aware of, where you noticed something that they didn't have to tell you about. I think people appreciate that. So if you were to spend some time in your various reports and performance analytic tools and then find some people, oh, this person I haven't recognized in a while, they've been struggling, we had some performance review issues with them in HR, here's an opportunity to make them feel great. You noticed it on the report, you go seek that person out. I'm talking a lot about brick and mortar type operations right now, but you can do this virtually as well. Then you find them and you just recognize their performance, and they will be a little bit surprised to see that you're noticing that. And that has its own set of benefits. You know, as they tell their peers, you know, the boss came up to me and said, I did a great job on this. I didn't even know he looked at that kind of stuff. Now it starts to spread that you've got your eye on various things, and people try to, you know, they'll gravitate toward that. They get that little dopamine hit in the brain from the either virtual or literal or face-to-face acknowledgement, pat on the back, and they want more of that. So you're reinforcing positive behavior is the bottom line here. Another thing you can do, and I've tried this in the past with limited success, but it works better with some organizations than others, is to sort of create a mechanism through which the team can nominate one another for acknowledgement. And so let's say it's not something that would show up on your report. You can introduce in a meeting situation or whatever, where a person nominates someone else and acknowledges the way that they helped them out, the way they went above and beyond. And sometimes a new person, you could ask a new person, could you share with the team who was most instrumental in helping you get trained up, and these kinds of things. Give some thought to how it might work in your organization, but don't put all the onus on yourself. Again, the decentralization of something like this and asking the team, you're creating a culture. If the team can recognize one another, so it's not always just the boss. And I think people really desire to have those in authority recognize them, but their peers as well is really important, where you know, they might be acknowledged for helping one another out. And I would try to set up something formally that someone could nominate, where it becomes automated. Again, if you have no skills with setting up things like databases and push notifications, reach out to my team. We'll set that up for you. It's not difficult and it's not expensive for us to do that for you. That's what we're here for. Another thing that I wanted to mention is it's not always about the top performance. In athletics, often what you'll see is the most improved player. So think about on your team, who is improving and it deserves acknowledgement. It still could be someone who's performing near the bottom of the chart, so to speak, but you're seeing a great deal of improvement. And maybe you can do that one formally, or it could be more in private, where you're like really taking the time to acknowledge the effort that someone's put in. Effort is a really important thing to acknowledge as well, even when it doesn't result in the desired results, even when it doesn't manifest in sales or something that would ordinarily catch the attention of the boss and the peers. The effort is there, and so you want to acknowledge that as well. The key is don't leave these things to chance. if you're listening to this video and you go, I don't know, there doesn't seem much magic in that, I'm telling you, this is really critically important for your organization. Even if you have a small organization, even if there's just 2 or 3 people working within a particular environment, somebody really needs to go out of their way to acknowledge the effort of the others. And it's incumbent upon you as the manager, as the business owner. And even if you just have business partners, other stakeholders in the business in a very small operation, take heed of this advice. Go out of your way to acknowledge the other people. Everyone appreciates it. And you can do this with your vendors, other stakeholders. Do this with your customers as well. You know, I wanted to focus predominantly on members of your team, your employees, but think about your other stakeholders. Do you have business partners? Do you have a spouse that works in the organization who maybe feels like they're being taken for granted? All the efforts that go out of your way. And if you're not doing this naturally, if you're not gifted at this, then this is all the more imperative, and it'll go so much further. Go out of your way, because you probably do really appreciate this person, but just like me, maybe you failed to acknowledge it. What I often did was I would boast about people behind their backs and sing their praises, and to their face I would clam up for some reason. I'm not sure why that was, but if you can recognize yourself in any of that, change that. But think about other ways. You can acknowledge your customers. There are a few organizations that I spent a lot of money with, and I thought, you know, I've got to be a VIP customer, and never heard a word from these people. Maybe they were kind to me or gave me good customer service. Obviously, I saw value and I was continuing to do business with them. But every now and then it would be nice for a person in management or someone I didn't ordinarily deal with to reach out to me and say, you know what? We were taking a look at our database and you are just one of our best customers. We wanted to thank you. We've done this and recognized our best customers. I highly recommend you do that as well. Go through that list of stakeholders, you know, your business partners, your management team, your frontline logistical personnel, your vendors, your customers, your surrounding community, your suppliers, all these types of stakeholders, and ask yourself, how can I recognize these people are all critical? That's what we mean when we say stakeholder. They have a stake in the success of your business. And since we all have this underlying need for recognition and appreciation for being appreciated, then why wouldn't you take the time to formalize a process? That's really what I wanted to get across to you today, is formalize this. Even if you think you're naturally good at this, ask yourself if you've checked off all the boxes that I talked about. Do you have an annual awards? Do you have some kind of rewards program and loyalty program in place for your customers? Or can you reach out? I could go on a long time about this. It's because it's so important, but I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. I'm very curious what you're doing in your organization. Do you have some brilliant ideas about how you celebrate success? Something I didn't touch on. Do you disagree with me in any way? Leave a comment. We need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.